am the CEO of Integrity ISR. I am also an SFA board member and the executive director of Global Space University. I'm very honored to be on the workforce development panel, and as General Bratton said, thank you all for showing up so late in the afternoon. We're really excited to talk about this. I think that it is of utmost importance that both the Space Force, academia, industry, we're all on the same page as we develop what will be the future of the space workforce. So, sirs, I'll let you introduce yourself and then we can have a great conversation.
So I'm Ed Vaughn, Director of Space Operations for the National Guard Bureau. Couple fans in the house.
I'm Damon Feldman. I am from the Space Development Agency, and I'm a federal employee.
Hey, good afternoon, folks. I'm Jason Childers, the Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chief Human Capital Officer, or S1 for the Space Force. I am a proud Space Force Chief, and super thrilled to be here today with everyone here in attendance, seeing our guardians and teammates from the industry, being able to gather here. An outstanding job from SFA, so thank you so much for putting on this awesome event.
This is tough. I'm Andy Aldrin. I haven't even gotten to the good part. So with Embry-Riddle University, I'm the program chair for Masters of Space Operations, which I will point out is now the largest interdisciplinary space studies program. I'm confident of this in the solar system. I used to say in the universe, but some of my astrophysicist buddies said, you don't really know that, do you? But I'm confident that we're the largest program in the solar system.
Give it up for him, come on. Chief Pogue, I'm staring at you to see how loud you cheer. Hey, Shawn Bratton, I am the special assistant to the CSO for a few more days, and then I'll start a new job I'm excited about, and I get to, hopefully before the end of the month, join the Space Force. Yeah. So, pretty excited about that too. So great to see all of you out there. And seriously, way to stick it out to the end of the day. You know, someone paid money to send you here, and you're getting your money's worth for sure. So good on you. Thanks, Jeff.
So, General Bratton, we'll start the questions with you. Being a new service, how is the Space Force establishing their workforce? In what ways does it differ from how the Air Force perhaps approaches talent management, and what are some of the biggest challenges you're seeing so far?
There's a lot in there. So the workforce, I think you guys know this, and General Saltzman did a great job, but just to sort of baseline us, one, clearly the smallest service, right? We bring in about 300 officers a year, about 500 enlisted into the Space Force. I think we're planning 500 civilian hires this year. Those numbers are tiny. You know, the Air Force sends 30,000 a year through basic training, the Army 100,000. Our workforce within the giant Department of Defense is small. It's a huge advantage. It's a huge advantage for us to try new things, to experiment, and to think about how to do things differently. And the thing that I've seen, and you know, you guys call me out if you don't think it's the case, is we're really working hard to hear your voice. For the military members, to understand what makes sense in your career as you progress. And we're able to do that because of our small size. I mean, I was on the phone today working with some colonel assignments, calling the individuals to work on. That's not anything unique to me. It happens for the chiefs. It happens across the service on, hey, how do we think about developing you to the needs of the service for certain, but also the needs of you as a guardian trying to develop the needs of your family. I think that we have some real flexibility there, brought in large part by our small size, but also just our approach and philosophy and how we think about talent management, human capital. It's really great. Chief, what do you think?
Oh, yes, sir. Spot on. In the question you talked about, you know, maybe what differs from Air Force, just to provide a little perspective. You know, if you think about when the Space Force stood up almost 4 years ago now, we were essentially carved out of the Air Force, especially when it comes to policy and talent management programs. And, you know, we had to do a lot of things really quickly to build out our service. And then over the last couple of years, we've really started to dive in and really understand each and individual program and policy as it relates to personnel programs, talent management, and really, to be honest, to just question why. And not because Air Force or anyone else is doing anything wrong, but we had to assess our programs and make sure that they're right for the needs of our guardians, for the needs of our service, and especially if you think about all the things that have been discussed today so far, starting with the CSO this morning, the brief from the Delta commanders, the discussion from the components, and hearing the complexities of what we are charged with doing in the space domain and what we're asking our very small force to do is very good reason on why we've got to question each of those things. So we certainly have gone in different directions where it's made sense for us. So you think in terms of assignments that you mentioned, sir, certainly a different way that we approach that for the Guardian Force. I think in terms of promotions, how we do our evaluations and appraisal processes, for the most part, a lot of those things we have gone different directions because we needed to. Some other areas we haven't. And so another thing, we've talked about our size, and while that is an advantage for us when it comes to talent management and being able to have that more intimate kind of you know, relationship with the talent management processes and the Guardian themselves, it also limits us a little bit. Sometimes we don't have quite the capacity to take on a lot of the new things that maybe a larger service has. So we have to find that right balance, but absolutely, again, we question why on the things, make sure what we drive towards is the right thing for our service moving forward.
If I could talk a little bit about that as well. So National Guard Space Operations has been in this business for about 30 years, alongside many of the folks in the room. And so what are some of the things we've learned, some of the things where we've failed, some of the areas where we've been successful that we can contribute and assist as the Space Force continues this journey on talent management. So I'll just point out General Bratton's one of the great success stories of the National Guard Space Operations Program, and will be, I think, the first accession across, or at least one of the first to actually go from National Guard Space Ops to become an actual Guardian wearing the blue. And that's fantastic, and everyone, all 1,200 National Guard are very proud of him. But here's a challenge, and I think, and I've participated in some diversity panels with Guardians, and a small organization, especially one like the Space Force, there is a virtual and literal line around the block to join the Space Force in many communities. Anybody that hears about it, learns about it, wants to be part of it. And so when you have a small force, there's a tendency, and actually by definition, exclusivity. So how do you have an exclusive, winning, heard, participatory force, and at the same time be inclusive? And so that's one of the things we've been challenged with in National Guard Space Operations. And I think we have a lot of lessons we can bring. We're working very closely behind the scenes with the staff to do that. But that balance between exclusivity and inclusivity, I think, is going to define a lot of how we do talent management going forward.
And actually, that leads me perfectly into the next question, which is, how is the Space Force approaching diversity and inclusion in its workforce development strategies?
I'll be happy to start with that one. So I would say first, from the term itself, it's actually been expanded from Presidential Executive Order for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility. So those are kind of the four pillars, if you will, from that program and that lens that we use to look at really everything from programs and policies and processes across the service. From kind of a programmatic view, again, as I was talking earlier, if you think in terms of how the Space Force was initially organized, we're to be a lean, agile, smaller service with a focus on operations. And that's what we've been charged to do. So some of the things we still rely on the Department of the Air Force, the Air Force for support purposes. That particular program, we are nested within the DAF, DEI&A office, but we also have professional staff that are experts in DEI&A spread across our organization. So on the headquarters, in the Chief Human Capital Office, we have an outstanding professional that helps us to look through all of our policies and programs through that lens to ensure that we're doing right by our guardians across the board and all the way down throughout the service. We have folks within our ranks to help us think through these things. So also there are a number of programs and things that of course we are heavily involved in, everything from the DAF barriers analysis working groups. I think General Vaughn, I think you're actually a huge part of as well. So we do a lot of work with them to identify barriers all the way from entry to service, all the way through someone's time in service with an eye on retention as well, and considering, again, that kind of lens from a programmatic view. But then I'll switch gears a little bit and talk on why I think it's extremely important. And again, I mentioned it earlier, if we think about the things that have been talked about today, just really made me think even more about this particular program in terms of we've got to get this right. When I hear the discussions on the complexities of the space domain, when we think about the no kidding wicked problems that our guardians are faced with today and we know are going to continue to face into the future, we must have a diverse workforce that has the diversity of thought to outthink a potential adversary, that, to be quite honest, are also really good at what they do. And we've got to continue to outpace that threat, and it'll be our diverse workforce that'll help us to do that.
So I want to touch on that subject from the supply side. And so I see the next generation coming in. And I grew up in aerospace industry where we have gotten better, but we are pale, stale, and male. And it's not necessarily pretty, it's getting better. But what I will tell you is that the kids coming in are incredibly diverse. And if you look at the student population we've got at Embry-Riddle in my program, it looks pretty much like America. There are a couple of areas where you probably do a little bit better. So you guys have got people coming in. We've got to get them in and get them excited. But I also want to touch on the last thing that you said, because I mean, I look at the whole space ecosystem, and I cannot think of a single segment where there isn't just incredible uncertainty. I don't know what's going to happen in any one of the industries that you guys face. And so you want to talk about uncertainty. I have to imagine, and General Bratton, you have a better perspective on this than me, but you face more uncertainty in your environment than any other of the services. And it's a good thing you're small, because you're going to have to be agile.
I had thought about two things on this topic, and I wrote it under the header, "Get a bigger tent." And so what I mean by that is, part of what the chief has already spoken about is the people aspect of Get a Bigger Tent, and it is a little bit awkward when you're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and the panel is, I mean, with the exception, pale and male and very old.
Don't forget stale.
Yeah, and stale. So there's making sure that there's opportunities for people who have different looks and different backgrounds, that aspect of it, clearly. But then there's also the aspect of the academic diversity. So we spend a lot of time talking about the hardcore STEM backgrounds that go into this industry and into the Space Force. But I would also advocate for a position where the success of a space enterprise has an equal part of some of the skills that you only pick up in a business school. So the marketing, the accounting, the finance, go over into a law school, into the regulatory environment that goes behind this. And then at a different level, there's also the success that comes in when certain skills are commoditized. And I use as an analogy the the aviation industry, where the United States is a global leader in aviation, in part because we've taken many skills, and you can go to any state in just about any county in the United States where there's a community college system, and you can find a place where a young kid coming out of school has a passion for aviation but might not want to be an aerospace engineer, but they can go be an airframe and power plant mechanic, and they can go through that training program. We need to ensure that as we look at how to build out the academic background for this mission space, that it also includes your trade skills and your community college type programs.
And actually, I think it goes one step further, right? When you look at what a lot of other countries are doing in K through 12 education, they're peppering in space mathematics that are needed for this space environment in at a much lower level. I know SFA, one of the things that we're looking at trying to get across the line this next year is exactly that, right? How can we partner with K through 12, with undergraduate and then higher institutions of learning to really build the future workforce, right?
Let me talk a little bit about that too. So when it comes to STEM and diversity, there are a lot of folks, and it just happens to their community, their family, the school they went to, the guidance counselors they got, that would be a very welcome, valuable, and a diverse member of our community, but they're not steered that way. And one of the things we've experimented with, and it's a work in progress, and we've been talking to S1 and A1 about this. Two of our National Guard space states are Alaska and Hawaii. And in Alaska, there is a large percentage of indigenous population who really want to be involved in space. But they may not just, at that point that they want to join, have those STEM credentials or even that STEM background. And so we've found ways through a sessions and waivers process to bring them on board to make the tent bigger, as you said, to get them into the program and then work on training once they're in the force. The same is true with the Hawaii National Guard and lots of Asia Pacific Islander folks that want to join the force, that want to be part of space. It's just extremely exciting. But at the point they became aware of it and the point they realized it, they hadn't up to that point been involved in STEM, and we've got to help them bridge that gap and get there.
When you look at opportunities for collaboration between the Space Force and academia and industry even, what do you see as both the most promising areas and maybe some challenges that we can get after together?
The example that certainly we can point to is the partnership with Johns Hopkins for PME for the officers. You know, it's in year one now. We'll see how that goes. It didn't make sense for the Space Force to stand up a space university, space war college of its own. Partly due to our size, but partly due to, you know, hey, there's a lot of people now who do that business really well. And so, you know, so that partnership, we didn't turn the whole thing over. We're still meeting the joint requirements. We're still tightly coupled with the university with Space Force faculty members. But, you know, that kind of world-class education that we're benefiting from, that Johns Hopkins brings to the table, and all the things that they could offer that we wouldn't have been able to do if we were trying to, you know, build and fund and start something just on our own. And we did it, by the way, you know, so much faster than anyone thought we could, so good job, STARCOM team. But then certainly we would have been able to do on our own if we were going through, you know, all the processes that the department has. And so I think that's a great example. That can't be the first and only. There has to be, you know, many more of opportunities to explore those. You know, we got to take care of the enlisted force, and where are we going with development of the enlisted force as they progress to senior NCO, and what do we think about bachelor's degrees for the enlisted force, and how strongly do we feel about that? I mean, we are not bringing in, when I went to basic training, it was all 18-year-olds right out of high school, and that is not the force that we're bringing into the Space Force. Average age is 22, many are married, many have some college, some have a bachelor's degree into basic training. So that requires not only a different basic training, but also just a different development model than certainly what, you know, probably Chief and I needed when we showed up at Lackland back in the day, because I was still, you know, learning how to brush my teeth and make my bed kind of stuff. I don't know that we need to teach that to Guardians. I think Guardians need, you know, have different expectations for sure and different needs, and we got to work that through, and academia can absolutely help us accelerate that.
You know, one of the things that I see that's different now from the way the military has grown up in the past, in particular space, is the military space was always kind of the big dog, and it was military space, and there were walls around it, more or less, whether it's classification or just programs. Today and in the future, you're going to be working so much more closely with industry, particularly with commercial industry, which is a different animal, as I think a lot of you are beginning to realize. And I think training them and giving them exposure to the breadth of the whole space ecosystem, including commercial, including civil, is going to be an important part of training your future leaders.
Absolutely, and to General Bratton's point, you know, on the enlisted training and education front, we heard it from the CSO this morning as he talked about having a highly technical and skilled enlisted force, and the fact that we've got to figure out how to best train and prepare them for those responsibilities. We're taking a really hard look at that right now. We did amazing work for our officer corps over the last few years and all the programs General Bratton just talked about, and now we're starting to pivot a little bit towards the enlisted force. And initially when we stood up, we inherited the schoolhouses and things for PME and other structures from the Air Force, but we've actually deliberately stood down the schoolhouses organic to the Space Force temporarily, so we can kind of take a look at a bridging strategy for now, while we're also really looking at the entire continuum of learning and development for the enlisted force, and certainly some opportunities for partnerships with academia and industry there, as we look at what is going to be inherently professional military education, what is going to be experiential, what are the other technical type trainings, but then what gaps are there in the competency model and framework that we're also working on that could be potentially met from academia or industry. I think will be highly important, and to include possible accreditation for our training and courses as well.
Yeah, I think, and Damon, I'd be interested in your take on the developmental path for civilians. We're talking about this a lot with Ms. Kelly's team in the S1 right now on, what percentage of the civilian workforce wants to be developed, like come in as a college graduate and stay with the Space Force for an entire career that may involve moving around. That is certainly not for everybody. But we think maybe it is for some people. We're sort of wrestling with that idea of, is the purpose of civilian, do you identify the skills you need and you go find someone with those skills and you hire them? Or should we swing that pendulum a little more into the development line on, hey, let's give opportunities for development to our junior civilians to progress within the Space Force so we can keep that, kind of retention for the civilian force. But I mean, you live it, so.
Yeah, so first off, my development as a civilian is different from a lot of others because I was active duty and in the reserve and joined the civil service program very late in life. And a lot of my professional development came through my affiliation through the Air Force Reserve, so they sent me to a lot of schools. But I have had the opportunity to lead junior civilians, and I work with, my peers, so many of my peers have PhDs, and they've been in industry, government, and floated back and forth throughout their entire career. So I've seen variations. There are plenty of younger civilians who want to be developed. They join the federal enterprise because they want to serve their nation, or they want to work on things that are fulfilling in a way that is different than when they are in industry. And we owe it to them to create those opportunities for development. The risk that I see is, there was a phrase that came out 5 or 6 years ago that was, it was a heavy drumbeat for a long time, and I don't hear it quite as often now. And it was a pejorative term, and we called it the frozen middle, that we can't move fast enough because this dadgum frozen middle. And my kind of pushback was, well, we recruit somebody and we train them to do their job a certain way, and that way is deliberate in following procedures and now we're beating people up for doing the exact thing that we train them to do. And I say that to say, we are working really hard to go really fast. Mr. Calvelli has been very clear on how he envisions space acquisitions to go. General Saltzman has been very clear on how he envisions space operations to go. So if we're going to have a development program for our civilian guardians, it has to help them understand that they're actually they have their feet in kind of two worlds. That there's a government system that is very deliberate, and General Saltzman alluded to that in his Space News article recently, but there's also a pressure to go as fast as we can go with diligence and effort, but at the same time that the federal government needs us to be mindful of certain processes that we still have to follow.
I really appreciate the Chief's reference to the term experiential. So education, training, development writ large, and the experiential piece, the standard status quo is there's this checklist, and every 2 years, every year and a half, however often, here, squadron command, this, that, and you go up. And if you deviate from that at all, to get a PhD, to learn another language, to go work in Mr. Calvelli's office and acquire space capabilities, if you do anything that's outside of that model, you're quote unquote off the track, and you're maybe not favored for development anymore. And I think General Saltzman hit the nail on the head. We've got to hear from the folks that are living this in the front line, the folks that are coming in early, and what kind of a career do you want? Do you want a blended career? Do you want the term transition to be used when you go from military to civilian, civilian to military, or would you like to see that integrated like we do with some of our deltas? And I think that experiential piece of it, I think that may be the glue and the key, because not only does it help develop, but if you provide meaningful, very intensely interesting experiences, like our state partnership program, you get to work with 100 nations around the world, that's also a retention tool, and that keeps people engaged, and it adds meaning in those tough times of your career when you just got to show up and row every day, and you have all these great things to look forward to.
So I think we have a tremendous opportunity here, because I see a lot of kids. We've got, did I mention it's the largest program? No. We've got about 350 kids in 2 years. The kids, a lot of them are kind of in their early 20s, mid 20s, that are taking the full master's program. We've got 900 that are taking classes, and they're all there because they love space. And they kind of split into two groups. What I've noticed with Embry-Riddle, which wouldn't be much of a surprise because we have such a strong presence with the military, such a strong military presence in the university overall, is that more than half of the students really don't want to go work for SpaceX, which is kind of incredible, because I thought the popular narrative is they all want to work for SpaceX. Some of them go, well, yeah, I know that actually SpaceX is a tough place to work. I want to go work for Blue, or I want to work for some other startup. About half of them want to work for Boeing or Lockheed. They're not really sure about the military, but I think we have a value proposition with the way you guys are branding the Space Force as an exciting place to work, a dynamic place to work, because you've got the population out there that loves space. This is the fastest growing program that Embry-Riddle has had, so kids love space. I think we need to work to figure out how to convince them that working for the Space Force is an exciting future. And I'm convinced over the course of the last couple of years, watching what you're all doing with acquisition and just really dramatically different ways of doing things in space, I think actually the Space Force is the most exciting place in space right now. So I think the material is out there. We've got to do a better job, and I'm there to help, bringing them in and understanding what a career really means.
Yeah, we're working hard right now, certainly within the S1 with Ms. Kelly's staff, and General Saltzman alluded to some of it this morning on really making sure we understand our sort of foundational roles. What does an enlisted member do in the Space Force? What's an officer do? What does a civilian do? What are the expectations at different ranks? And are we delivering training and education at the right times? I think you'll start to see some of that as we get into next year. Certainly, and he hit it on retention is better than we expected, quite honestly, and really good. So everything's up in the 90%. We got some things we got to clean up on. We inherited the whole force, and so, for example, like we have more captains' billets on the books than we can ever be able to fill. So we got to think about how are we using captains, and are they in the right place, and be deliberate about cleaning some of that up, because we just got everything that we got from the Air Force and the Army and the Navy and everything that transferred in. So there's a lot of work going on right now, and Secretary Kendall is really driving us at this. And recruiting, by the way, is not a challenge today for sure. People want to come join the Space Force, and we're still able to be pretty selective on who's coming in. I think the unquestionable thing that you kind of hinted at is we absolutely got to get bigger than we are today to do the tasks that you are challenged to do, and so we'll keep working towards that goal. But we got to grow deliberately. If we grew 5,000 billets in a year, we wouldn't be able to get all those folks through training, and so there's got to be a deliberate plan for growth, and I think that is some of the work that the headquarters staff owes you guys on how are we going to do that. But there is a lot going on right now, and I think you'll start to see some of those changes coming in next year and the following year.
Excellent. So looking at the National Guard Bureau, and you see a lot of cross-utilization of skills between military and civilian careers, right? So what lessons can the Space Force learn from that experience as they start to bring in the same?
Yeah, and we're obviously working closely together as a staff to make sure that the good and the bad. So a lot of this, if you look at 30 years of space operations in the National Guard, and then many more in the other domains, how do you integrate a civilian and military career? And should you, right? Is that a good thing? And as General Bratton alluded to, in some cases it is. There's a certain percentage of folks that are going to join uniform military service. They're going to commit to that for the entire career, and thank goodness they do. There's a whole other group of folks that may love the military, may love what we do for our country, but they're going to commit to a civilian career for whatever reason. I think what we're seeing now, and as I walk around and I talked to Guardians earlier today, as folks get to these decision points, they don't want a decision they make at age 18 or 22 to be a 30-year decision. They want to be able to make a decision to do something really awesome and meaningful and flow between the parts of the career that'll make sense. There's a lot of folks in that category. And so in the National Guard, I'll tell you some of our lessons are because we've done certain things wrong. And other things we've figured out, and we've maybe done a few things correctly. And some of the things that we've had to do as commanders is the individual looks at their career as their one career, not as here's the military side, here's the civilian side, and by the way, you're going to go back and forth between statuses. It was just like what General Saltzman's vision was today. And you saw that, the image of the 3 Guardians and then 3 civilians, and it was the same people. And being able to lead that kind of force, to lead an integrated force, I think that's something we'll be able to bring to the table, to the fight, and really help the Space Force grow that out.
Yes, sir, I think that's some really good points. I've noticed, research has shown that folks aren't committed to, 20, 30 plus year careers with a singular company anymore. So having that ability to flow, I think, would be key for us to consider, especially for retaining the talent we need. And I think of all my experiences working with Guard, Reserve units in the past, my civilian teammates, amazing what those teams bring that, from my military counterparts that have been active duty their whole career, we tend to think in a certain way just based on our development and our experiences, and folks were coming in, that had worked at SpaceX or Lockheed or Boeing or someone else, but they also came in and worked crew operations with us, and they would just see problems differently. That was very beneficial to our operations at the time, so I see a lot of benefit there.
I mentioned it a moment ago in my comments that I spent a lot of my earlier career in the Reserve. Just like in the Guard, one of the great pieces about that opportunity, and General Saltzman touched on it today when he was talking about the Space Force Personnel Management Act. And if Space Force is able to implement it the way that he has envisioned it, it will be a very good thing, because there were times in my reserve career where I was very active duty like, where I spent a lot of time full time, where I spent a lot of time moving from place to place. There were times in my reserve career where I was very much like a traditional reservist, where I had a classic job, and I was doing either 1 week in a month, where I was an IMA, and I would go spend a couple of weeks here at a location, et cetera. But the point was that I had a passion for the mission. I felt valued when I was at work. I was able to do really great things, working on GPS or commanding an organization that did defensive space control or missile warning or weather or this whole library of capabilities. And so being able to be part of that and be able to meter it based off of my family's needs first, but then also being able to come back into the Air Force and Space Force in a higher duty cycle capacity and feel valued and contributing to the team was just immeasurable. It attributed greatly to my staying with it for as long as I did. And so my hope is that, as I mentioned a moment ago, that General Saltzman's vision for how he wants to implement the Space Force Personnel Management Act comes to fruition, because it will create these places where the Space Force will have these members that will stay come in and stay active duty their entire time, or stay full time throughout their career, but others that will be able to meter their contribution to the mission based off of their personal needs and their family needs.
Excellent. Well, we are about to wrap up. Are there any final thoughts on future challenges that you see, or ways that you think that industry, there's a lot of industry partners here as well that want to help you tackle some of these issues. Are there any ideas that you have in the final 4 minutes that you'd like to let them know about?
Hey, I just say, make your voice heard. We pay attention to what you're saying out there in all forms, whether you're in uniform or civilian or industry. We really want to hear. We know we don't have all the answers as we're working at these, tough problems of how are we going to implement SFPMA and how do we think about work roles. So keep being loud. We want to hear it from you.
So I kind of want to echo the same point, but from a different perspective. I want to hear from all of you and all of you out there what you're looking for from academia and training, what we need to do better, what you're really looking for in your career goals. We spent a lot of time as we built this program talking to people, but we're really just getting started, so it's very early, and there are several other programs around the country that are doing this, and we're all talking to each other and learning, and we want to hear from all of you. So please take the opportunity whenever you can to get in touch with me personally or somebody from Embry-Riddle or somebody through the SFA and let us know what we need to do better, because we're kind of a young industry too. The idea of teaching interdisciplinary space studies is really something that's pretty new. So let us know what we need to do better.
I think this is certainly an amazing opportunity, right, to get together and connect with our partners and teammates in industry and academia. So certainly events like this are helpful. Also, I just wanted to throw, since you kind of threw the question out about future challenges, a little bit off topic from industry, but just something I want to take the opportunity to say. I would say a challenge for us in the future is how we continue to build out our service and operate under the ideals from which it was established. So we kind of started with and I'm talking from a human capital standpoint, how we treat people, our guardians and our ranks. So, we were initially established and we had the Guardian Ideal, which really drew a lot of folks to our service. That then was translated into the Guardian Spirit, and then you'll see directly translated into the CSO's line of effort number 2, amplifying the Guardian Spirit. A lot of good things to thread there, but very important on being able to retain the talent that we need and having that right level of relationship and care for the guardians in our ranks. And as we start to shape and build policy now as our own distinct service, reminding ourselves to not want to point to policy as an easy button and instead doing what's right the first time. Just throwing that as a challenge for us to think about as we move forward.
I would offer to industry and academia, if you have not done so already, there are 2 pretty good documents, easy to find on the internet, that are worth reading, policy-type documents. One is from the Biden-Harris administration, and it's the Interagency Roadmap to Support Space-Related STEM Education and Workforce. It was published in, I think, October, November of late last year. And the other one is the State of the Space Industrial Base for 2022. Both of those have excellent sections in there that outline a lot of what we've touched on here about what it takes to have a vibrant space ecosystem. That ecosystem is vital for the health of the Space Force, because without it, the Space Force is drawing from a dwindling well.
So from the industry perspective, so we have about 1,200 National Guard doing space operations of one kind or another. About a third of those are actually in industry. And so when I go to the industry halls, there's a better than 50-50 chance that I'll run into somebody wearing a suit and tie that occasionally serves in National Guard. We have one of our squadrons is forward in AFRICOM in harm's way doing electromagnetic warfare, and that represents about 6 companies from industry who have let those folks go. And so the back and forth with industry is if you have folks, either National Guard Reserve or as we develop SFPMA and are able to do that part-time piece, allow them to serve and allow them to go do that, because we're in this together. And as one of the Guardians pulled me aside, I was just asking what do you think about it? Somebody came up to me and I'll get the name later and give credit, and said, we are more than our specialty code. We are full human beings, and we're going to win this war because we're full human beings, not just because of our specialty code, as important as that might be. And so General Whiting has command and controlled National Guard Space Forces. General Chess has. We have Colonel Gonzo Lance of the newly stood up command over in UCOM, Africa. I see Dr. Jason Womack. He and I talk a lot about this. But I just want you to know the National Guard Space Operations are bridging that gap, 100% committed to General Saltzman's vision. And we're all here to serve. Thank you.